We are about to dive into one of the most twisted, shocking, and just plain bizarre true crime cases of the last decade. It's a story that, on the surface, looked like a perfect, loving bond between a mother and her sick daughter, but it ended with a brutal murder that ripped the lid off a lifetime of unbelievable secrets.
So it all just explodes onto the scene on June 14th, 2015. A single, terrifying sentence pops up on a shared Facebook page. For all the friends and neighbors of Dee Dee Blanchard and her chronically ill daughter, Gypsy-Rose, this post was just unthinkable. It set off an immediate wave of panic.
You can just imagine the chaos this post caused. But the biggest question on everyone's mind was about Gypsy-Rose, this sweet, frail girl that everyone knew always in her wheelchair. Had her mother's killer taken her? Was she even still alive? This is right where the mystery starts.
All right, so our story really begins in Springfield, Missouri. Police get called to the house because of that Facebook post, and they're about to uncover just the first layer of this incredibly dark case.
So when police get inside, the scene is grim. Dee Dee is found murdered in her bed. And Gypsy-Rose, the girl everyone in the community believed was fighting leukemia and a whole list of other awful diseases, she was gone. Right away, everyone assumed the worst, a horrifying kidnap murder. The search for Gypsy was on big time.
But here's where the story takes a massive turn. As investigators started digging that initial story, it began to completely fall apart. And the truth they were about to find was something that absolutely no one could have ever predicted.
Now, to really get the level of shock here, you have to understand the image they had. Gypsy-Rose was kind of a local celebrity. I mean, her story as this brave, sick kid had inspired so much generosity. Habitat for Humanity actually built them a special house. The Make-A-Wish Foundation sent them to Disney World. To everyone, she was the picture of tragic innocence.
The local sheriff, Jim Arnott, really summed it up perfectly. Things are not always what they appear. You see, investigators tracked the IP address from that Facebook post all the way to Wisconsin, and when they got there, they found Gypsy. But the scene they walked into, it wasn't what anyone expected at all.
Gypsy was alive and well. In fact, she had never been sick. The girl that everyone had seen confined to a wheelchair for years simply stood up and walked right in front of the police. The entire community, everyone who had donated and supported them, had been completely duped. Gypsy wasn't a kidnapping victim, she was now the prime suspect in her own mother's murder.
So how on earth did things get so twisted? This wasn't some sudden crime of passion. No, this was the explosive end to a fabrication that had been carefully built for more than 20 years.
I mean, the scale of this deception is just staggering. Dee Dee told everyone, doctors, neighbors, charities, that Gypsy had leukemia, epilepsy, muscular dystrophy. I mean, the list just goes on and on. She even claimed Gypsy had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. And the absolute truth, none of it was real. Not one thing.
And we're not just talking about telling lies here. This was physical. Dee Dee put Gypsy through very real and totally unnecessary medical procedures. She convinced doctors to remove her salivary glands. She would shave Gypsy's head to make her look like a chemo patient and made her use a feeding tube she didn't need, which, by the way, ended up making her teeth rot and fall out.
So, what could possibly drive a mother to do this? Well, experts point to this rare and really severe form of abuse. It's called factitious disorder imposed on another, or FDIA. You might have heard it called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's a psychological condition where a caregiver literally fakes or even causes illnesses in someone they're caring for, all to get attention and sympathy for themselves.
And this whole deception, it wasn't a one-time thing. It was this slow, escalating nightmare that started basically when Gypsy was a baby. A huge turning point was Hurricane Katrina. Dee Dee used the chaos as the perfect excuse to say all of Gypsy's medical records were lost, which let them move to Missouri and start fresh. At one point, a doctor actually suspected abuse, but tragically he never reported it. And as Gypsy got older and tried to push back, her mother's control became violent.
But even under Dee Dee's thumb, completely controlled, Gypsy found a secret lifeline to the outside world. That lifeline was the internet, and it would ultimately become her path to what she saw as her one and only way to escape.
So you have this insane contrast in Gypsy's life, right? In her real life, she's this sick, infantilized patient, totally trapped in a wheelchair. But secretly, at night on the computer, she was just a young woman. She was exploring who she was, finding romance, and dreaming about a life where she could finally be free from her mom.
And in that online world, she meets a guy named Nicholas Godejohn. Now, he had his own mental health struggles, but for Gypsy, he represented a future. Their relationship got serious fast. It went from flirting online to a desperate, dark plan. They decided that murder was the only way out for her.
The plan they hatched was chillingly simple. Gypsy paid for Godejohn's bus ticket to come down to Missouri. On the night of the murder, she let him into the house and handed him the knife. While he was in the other room stabbing her mother to death, Gypsy hid in the bathroom with her hands over her ears. Afterwards, they grabbed more than $4,000 in cash that Dee Dee had in the house, and they took off, thinking they'd actually gotten away with it.
Well, of course they didn't get away with it. They were caught pretty quickly, and their capture led to the legal consequences that would end up defining both of their lives.
In court, their fates really split. Nicholas Godejohn, the one who actually held the knife, was convicted of first-degree murder and got life in prison without parole. But Gypsy's case was seen very differently. The prosecutor himself acknowledged the extreme mitigating circumstances of the abuse she suffered, so they offered her a plea deal for second-degree murder. Her sentence, 10 years.
And that brings us right up to today. Gypsy was released from prison on parole at the end of 2023 after serving 8 years. She's since become this huge social media sensation, a real public figure, trying to navigate a world that, honestly, she was never allowed to be a part of.
But her release from prison hasn't ended this story. Not by a long shot. In fact, it's opened up a really fierce debate about what her true role was in this whole tragedy.
And this is where the story gets incredibly nuanced, and it really splits public opinion right down the middle. On one side, you have the view that Gypsy was a brainwashed victim of just horrific, unimaginable abuse, who felt that murder was her only possible way out. But on the other side, there's the argument that she was a knowing participant in her mom's scams, sort of a child actor who played her part for the Disney trips and the charity, and then just decided the con was over.
And that, really, is the central question that still hangs over this entire case. It forces all of us to look at some really uncomfortable truths about abuse, manipulation, and where we draw the line on culpability. Was what Gypsy-Rose Blanchard did a final desperate act to survive a situation that was impossible? Or was the murder just the final chapter in a life that was built from day one on deception? It's an answer we may never truly have.